So you speak about game A as the game that civilization basically has been playing, or that humans have been playing in concert, you could say, together for the past 10,000 years or so. How many?
35.
35. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not an S curve. So for the first like 15, 20 of those, it's not really noticeable. It's like
Yeah.
small fits and
Yeah.
starts, and things
Yeah.
pop and fall. And then, around 10,000 years, we're like, yeah, we're definitely in it.
And the human experience of that now in Western culture is one of deep dislocation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me do a bit of so the word meaning,
Mm-hmm.
simulated meaning, and meaningfulness.
Mm-hmm.
It's well, for many people, it's easier to look at the problem at the level of the objective. So we see climate change,
Mm-hmm.
the soil degradation. We see
Mm-hmm.
water pollution or loss of water. But the interior is equally strip mined.
Mm-hmm.
The interior
Right.
is equally desertified.
Right.
And the interior here is the interior of all possible interiors.
Uh-huh.
So the relationships between and among people, what I might call community.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to, again, so I'll just define the term. It's nice that we have potentially a language barriers. So we're absolutely certainly not able to communicate using words. We can just use words and define them. So I will define community to mean real relationships, authentic, rich, complex relationships among, in this case, people. And by the way, as it turns out, also nature, but we don't have to worry about that just yet. And then I'm going to define this other term. I'm just going to society.
Mm-hmm.
And society is formal. Society is mediated by complicated. So when my mom makes me dinner, that is a communal relationship.
Mm-hmm.
When McDonald's gives me dinner, that is a social relationship.
Mm-hmm.
In both cases, I get dinner, but there's a very different context. And society, most fundamentally, is a parasite on community.
Mm.
Its most fundamental essence is that it just consumes the meaningfulness in the relationships of community.
It fabricates and simulates that which is meaningful and integrous in community.
Exactly. And so what it does is there has to be something real, a real relationship, or something that is in the relationship of community, and then society intermediates that.
Mm-hmm.
It gets in between, and then it fabricates, it simulates it. It says,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're still getting dinner.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's more efficient,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's this trick, right? It's the devil's bargain once again.
Mm-hmm.
You get as much as you like. You can get more than you could get before. You have growth. You have more mammon, right? The deal of mammon. And by the way, in the case of most, the contemporary version of society, money is the primary mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have money, right, then you can take the food from other people. Right? You're the one you get to keep it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So society, right, that dynamic, the relationship between society as defined herein and community as defined herein is this relationship of the corrosion, the corruption, the degradation, the strip mining, the extraction of the interior of human relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, exactly the same thing is happening in the interior of a distinct individual.
Mm-hmm.
You might call that identity.
Mm-hmm.
Self and identity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Self is like community in our analogy. And it's like nature in the bigger context.
Mm-hmm.
And identity is like society.
Mm-hmm.
Identity is a parasite. Identity exists by virtue of intermediating relationships in the interior of self and simulating them and extracting them and making them more salient, more speakable, more controllable, but at the cost of generating havoc in both the micro and the macro. And so the same dynamic happens at all these different levels. And by the way, are mutually reinforcing. Society wants identity. Society can interface with identity very well. Society doesn't like selves. Society in selves is much more problematic. Self recoils at society.
Uh-huh.
Identity plays the society game.
Uh-huh.
So there's a sort of a conspiracy between the intrinsic dynamics of all these different characteristics, which is why the process unfolds in the way that it unfolds.
Uh-huh.